In this video, I'm going to break down how to learn web development in 2024 through 7 levels of growth. This is a basic guideline to getting you started, and it's what I wished I knew back when I started learning how to code. This guide will help you get a solid footing in programming, learn the fundamentals of front-end web development faster, and get you closer to working as a professional software developer so you can work at your desk, have autonomy over how you get your work done, and make good money doing it. Hey, my name is Khan. I'm currently a software engineer at a startup, and I've worked for big tech companies like Sony and Google, and I make these educational videos to help beginners who want to transition into a career in coding. This is a basic roadmap that I loosely followed, but it has since been updated with tweaks that are appropriate for 2024. Okay, let's dive in. Level 1 is to get started. As a front-end developer, getting started breaks down into 2 parts: getting started with HTML and CSS and getting started with JavaScript. And the reason why you want to touch both of these is because you'll be using both as a front-end developer. You want to get a taste for each of these things now so you aren't going in completely blind. So here's how to get started with JavaScript. Start with Code Academy tutorials to get your feet wet. It will teach you the basics of basics and give you an overview of the syntax. Think of this like your first foray into a new language that you want to learn how to speak. Obviously, you'll only learn a few surface level things during your first few sessions. It'll all be very unclear, and you'll finish the first few lessons only understanding a few contrived things and no real deep understanding. That's okay. The point of this part is not to establish depth of knowledge, but really just to expose yourself. At this point, don't try to assess whether you like to code or not. It's too early to tell, and chances are most people won't enjoy it at this stage anyways because you're not good enough to feel any sense of accomplishment. Over time, competence will breed enjoyment, so you can expect enjoyment to come a little bit later. Here's how to get started with HTML and CSS. You dabble with HTML and CSS by trying to change something on a web page. A lot of front-end development comes down to dealing with the downstream decisions of user interface design and user experience. While this is not our entire job as front-end developers, a big portion of it will be centered around building out user interfaces. That means you'll be touching HTML and CSS in some way, so it's best if you at least dabble in it now. For someone that's a complete beginner who's never touched code before, try visiting w3schools.com and navigate to CSS backgrounds. I'll leave a link to this in the description below. On the page that allows you to modify the code, try changing the background color to some other color of your choice. And once you do that, try changing the background to an image of your choice. You'll need to Google around for how to do this, but this will be a good foray into trying to find answers for yourself. Much of our work as developers is going to be digging up answers. Hint, if you want a shortcut, use ChatGPT, as it's often more efficient now than Googling. Back when I was starting to learn programming in middle school and high school, I was dabbling with HTML and CSS on my MySpace page. Gone are those days where you could tweak the actual front-end code as an end user to your social media profile. What I didn't realize was how transformative that experience was for me. It introduced me to the world of front-end development. After dabbling a bit into HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you have a question to ask yourself. Do you have 60 to 90 minutes per day that you can invest over the next 2 weeks? The question is not, do you enjoy coding? Because you haven't really gotten deep enough into the weeds to know whether you actually enjoy it yet. You'll only be able to find enjoyment once you develop a degree of skill. So this is a question we'll revisit later. Another reason why I asked this question in the form of, do you have time to invest, is because programming is a potentially life-changing skill. And if you can manage to become competent at it, it will most definitely change your life. But it's going to require time, dedication, and effort. If your answer to the question is a no, you don't have time to invest an hour into yourself over the next few weeks, then you'll probably want to first work on your priorities to make learning code something you actually want to take seriously. All meaningful change is going to start with whether you have enough self-respect, self-love, and prioritization skills to be able to say yes to upskilling and learning new things. If your answer to the question is already a yes, then let's jump into level 2. All right, level 2 is to get better at JavaScript. My go-to recommendation for getting better at JavaScript is to work through the first 5 chapters of Eloquent JavaScript. This book can be read online for free at eloquentjavascript.net. I'll also have a link to it somewhere in the video or in the video description. The reason why I recommend this book specifically is because it's more like a great book about programming that happens to use JavaScript as the language. And as a beginner, this distinction between learning programming and learning JavaScript might be unclear. When you're just getting started, you're learning both programming principles as well as the specific language you're writing in. For example, when you write var x equals 5 to create a variable in JavaScript, what you're actually doing is creating a variable and assigning it to a number typed value of 5 from a programming principle standpoint. And this brings with it a whole host of questions, Like, what is a value? What is typed value? Why can we use decimal numbers? I thought computers could only read ones and zeros. What is a variable? What is an assignment? There's a lot to unpack in just a few characters, and this book does an excellent job at it without being dull. This book will cover the deeper fundamentals of programming. It's not just about showing you the syntax like online tutorials. Now, note that I said only read the first 5 chapters, and this is because there's a lot of complexity to programming principles, and you aren't ready to tackle the entirety of a book like Eloquent JavaScript. As you progress through the first 5 chapters, you'll notice that the reading material becomes harder to grasp and the exercises get challenging very quickly. That's because the principles you're wrestling with get more complex every chapter. It's not in the interest of total beginners to dive deep into the later chapters yet. If you try this, you'll be in over your head and depleted of motivation before you know it. The biggest bang for your buck is going to be to focus on chapters 1 through 5. However, it's not going to be easy. It's not for the uncommitted, which is why I asked if you have the time to invest 60 to 90 minutes a day into this over several weeks. Once you get through these first 5 chapters, you have another question to ask yourself at this stage. How does programming feel to you? Are you absolutely miserable, or do you actually enjoy the weeds of being stuck on problems? Most people will fall into one of 3 camps. 1, they will either absolutely enjoy it, lose track of time when stuck on hard problems. 2, they will be completely miserable. Coding won't feel like it's for them. And 3, they'll be somewhere in the middle. They enjoy it at times, but not always. For the first 2 camps, it's pretty clear whether you should continue to invest time into this or not. However, for most people, you'll probably be somewhere in the middle. And let me just say this, it's okay not to love doing something, especially at the start. This is the reality with basically any new pursuit you take on. March on forward anyways, because the answer will become clearer as you develop more competence. In either case, it's important to have this honest conversation with yourself. Level 3 is to build Lodash functions. The very last chapter of Eloquent JavaScript was on higher order functions, and that's because JavaScript is flooded with higher order functions. They are literally everywhere, whether you realize it yet or not. It's kind of what makes the language useful, but more on why this is in another video. Level 3 is going to be about digging deep and getting tons of practice with higher order functions. Think of this as your last spurt to develop a real grip on the language. Once you're past this level, you will feel like you actually know JavaScript pretty well, and it'll be a big confidence booster. So in this level, we're going to focus on a popular utility library in JavaScript called Lodash. Lodash is a library that basically gives you additional functionality when working with arrays, objects, and functions. It's functionality that's not included in the language since it's not necessary all the time for everyone, but it's very useful a lot of the time. This exercise will focus on not using Lodash, but to re-implementing parts of Lodash. I actually have a GitHub repository and a replit link for you to dive deep into this exercise. I'll leave a link to it in the description below. Let me know if you'd be interested in a video for a breakdown of my solutions to these Lodash problems by commenting below, and I'll get to work on creating this. Level 4 is to build front-end projects with HTML, CSS, and vanilla JavaScript. The work of a developer is to build stuff that people can use, and so that's what we'll focus on. The primary driver for what you're deciding to learn should be by way of building a project. You can use tutorials, courses, lectures, and books as a way to supplement your learning to target specific subproblems you get stuck on along the way. And this, in my opinion, is the best way to learn, because you don't want to be learning completely devoid of context. You want to be practicing and making stuff imperfectly, getting stuck and getting yourself unstuck. This is what learning software development looks like, and it's quite frankly what we actually do on the job. JavaScript 30, a free course by Wes Boss, is a great resource for starting your first HTML, CSS, and vanilla JavaScript project. It has tons of ideas and even reference solutions to those ideas. I urge you not to look at any reference solutions until you've completed your project though. I'll leave a link to this in the video description. Let me know if you'd be interested in kind of a video tutorial or a walkthrough of building front-end projects with vanilla JavaScript by commenting below. Now, as you proceed with making things, you'll realize that you have a lack of conceptual knowledge and things will be vague and unclear. The best developers can quickly identify what they don't know and what they do know and fill gaps as necessary to make progress. This skill takes time to develop. At first, you'll get stuck because you don't know what you don't know. And in those cases, you won't know how to unblock yourself. For this, resort to a resource like roadmap.sh's front-end roadmap to give you an idea of what a reasonable learning path looks like in terms of order of concepts. I'll leave a link to roadmap in the description below. There's also a surprisingly active and supportive community on sites like Reddit and its programming subreddits where you can post high-level questions and someone more experienced than you will typically chime in and give you direction. Level 5 will be to build front-end projects with a popular UI framework. This level will be about stepping into the world of real-world UI development. To be completely honest with you, all the projects you've built up to this point in vanilla JavaScript is not how resilient production web apps are built by well-funded startups and big tech companies these days. The reason why we've spent so much time not doing what real-world front-end development looks like is because most of your value as a front-end developer will come from how well you know the basics and fundamentals. The high-level tools like UI libraries and frameworks come and go with time. Moreover, they're designed to help you be productive, not teach you the fundamentals. And a first-time learner needs to focus on the fundamentals. That's why we haven't touched these tools up to this point. The UI library I recommend today, as of March 2024, is React.js. It's a UI library released in 2013, written by the engineering team over at Meta. Since its inception, it's overtaken the industry as the go-to UI library for the web and still reigns supreme today. And although the sentiment for React is slowly starting to shift to other technologies like Svelte, code bases written in React will stick around for a very long time. You can honestly build anything you've built up to this point using React.js, but you can just Google around for React.js project ideas, and you'll be hit with more ideas than you know what to do with. Just pick an idea and get started. You'll also need to Google around for how to get started with React, because there's going to be a bunch of tooling and other stuff you didn't know you had coming. My advice would be to not worry about too many of the details like build tooling, npm yarn packages, and boilerplate repos. You can really get lost in the weeds on this stuff if it's your first React project. Just chill and know that you'll refine your understanding of these tools as you tackle more and more projects, but it's more important that you just get your first React project under your belt. Once you finish one project, do another, then another. I recommend doing at least 3 projects with the UI library for reinforcement. Remember, consult something like roadmap.sh along the way so you have an idea of what high-level concepts you're learning and have an idea of what to expect next. Level 6 is to build a mini component library. As a front-end developer, the bread and butter of what we do in today's ecosystem is design components. Whether you're using an existing UI component library like Material UI or Ant Design or anything else, chances are you'll still be building up components on top of these UI component libraries. It's important to get exposure to what designing low-level UI components is like so that you can learn the best practices for component API design. The challenges of building a sensible UI component that looks decent, is easy to use, and remains flexible so developers can override defaults is a really challenging task. The project for level 6 is going to get you into the nitty-gritty of UI development. While all the projects so far have been about expanding your breadth of knowledge by touching different aspects of front-end development, this one will be about diving deep into component design. And I think that's appropriate today because components are everywhere in modern web codebases. The only 2 components in this mini library that you need to do are a button and a text input. You might think this is relatively simple, but if you take into account all the various states that a button and input can have, just these 2 components alone will be several hundred lines of code and will take at least a couple days of deliberate, focused effort to get it right. In terms of design, you can just copy a popular component library and make it look like their button and input, or just roll with your own design. Now there's a lot more to how to go about doing this exercise, so if you're interested in tackling this project with me, comment down below and I'll see what exercises I can come up with. Level 7 and beyond. Once you get this far, I don't think there's any one specific roadmap that makes sense for everyone. It's really going to depend on what kind of projects you want to work on and what skills you want to develop. But keep in mind this one core idea. Once you have enough exposure to information and have enough project experience to be self-sufficient, start focusing on engineering things. The difference between just building and engineering is the rigor and robustness of your decision making. It's the difference between a hobbyist or a student tackling a project for the sake of learning or getting something out the door, versus real work in a company on a team of software developers. Our work involves balancing competing priorities like deadlines, time to market, internal team priorities, available human resources, system constraints, feature robustness, developer productivity, maintainability, and a whole host of other factors. Why is this all important? Because building software is a research and development cost to companies, and R&D costs has risk written all over it if left up to a junior programmer that doesn't have the foresight into how robust things are built. There's a lot of pitfalls, mistakes to avoid, and tough decisions to make when designing software for live users. And in order for a company to bet on you as a new software developer on their team, you have to radiate strong decision-making skills that reduce risks for the company. In short, that means you have to know your stuff and how your decisions may or may not incur extra costs for the company in the form of scaling bottlenecks, project maintainability, product quality, and more. So what does this mean for you? At this later stage in your development, you want to focus your efforts on solving problems thoroughly. That means understanding the trade-offs between different approaches that other developers have taken for their companies and their unique contexts. Yes, This will take research and digging around for insightful gold. This day-to-day decision making done by professional developers are the keys to your growth as a junior programmer. Most of this gold can be found on software engineering blogs, so be sure to stay up to date on current trends and best practices as a software developer. For example, one of my favorite engineering blogs to follow is one called Decision Node by a software startup called Eraser. Check them out. I'll leave a link to it in the description. I promise you that doing this will build your foundational knowledge and close conceptual gaps so you can be a meaningful contributor to any project that comes your way. Best of luck on your journey in learning front-end development. And that's it for today's video. Let me know if you have any questions or comments about this video, and I'd be happy to answer any of them. I also have a newsletter dedicated for people who want to transition careers into software development. I'll leave a link to it in the description below. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye-bye.